All right, everybody, I'm going to have you take out your notes. Today we're going to learn about how to graph parabolas, and we're going to do it a couple different ways. Because we are learning about and taking notes on graphing, if you would like to grab some little graph papers to tape or staple into your notes, that would be a pretty good idea. Otherwise, you're going to have to make little sketches on lined paper, and that might not turn out as well. So it's kind of up to you, but my suggestion is to pause really quick, go grab some graph paper, and then come back and have that handy next to your notes. You can cut them out and staple them in after you're done watching the video, okay? All right, so you should hopefully have that graph paper if you want it, and then you're going to go ahead and flip to the notes section of your notebook. And our objective, like I said, is we're going to be graphing a parabola from a table or by finding intercepts. Those are going to be the two different ways that we learn how to do it. Now, we're going to show you both, but you can kind of choose whichever method works best for you, okay? So if you really like making a table, you can do that. If you really like the idea of finding intercepts and just graphing from those, you can do it that way as well, okay? But we're going to be talking about graphing. So you have that objective. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to graph from a table, okay? And we're going to do this example. We're going to do y equals x squared minus 2x minus 15. Now the tricky part as a table is it's hard to know kind of what numbers to use, and so you kind of have to play around with it. I usually start from -3 to 3, and then if I have to back up and add more numbers, then I do that. Now I've already kind of seen what this graph looks like, so when I made this table I ended up going from -4 all the way up to 6, so it's kind of a large table. But you're going to copy that table down, and we're about to fill it in. I'm going to show you how to do that. I should also mention that you're going to need a calculator. So if you need to, pause this video and go grab a calculator, because that is super key that you're doing this along with me. All right, grab those calculators out, and here's what we're going to do. One at a time, we're going to take our values in our table and plug them in for x in this equation, okay? So everywhere you see x, you're going to plug that in. Now, the key to doing this well and getting it right is to put your numbers in parentheses. We've been practicing this since the beginning of the year, but you got to get that number in parentheses when you type it into your calculator, or it is not going to work. So I'm going to write it out, and I would like you to do that as well, but I'm going to start by plugging -4 in for x. And so I get -4 squared minus 2 times -4 minus 15. Notice how I have parentheses around that number I plugged in. You need to do that every single time, okay? So grab your calculator and plug it in, exactly like you see it there. And you could also do this without your calculator. You know that -4 squared is 16, -2 times -4 is +8, and minus 15. No matter how you do it in your calculator or in your head, you're going to get an answer of 9. Okay, so we put 9 in our table right underneath that. Let's do it one more time together. I'm going to plug -3 in everywhere I see x. And so I do -3 squared minus 2 times -3 minus 15. I plug all of that into my calculator, or I do it in my head, doing 9 plus 6 minus 15. No matter what I do, I end up with an answer of 0. Okay, again, parentheses is the key here. What I would like you to do is pause, okay, and fill in the table the rest of the way. I want to make sure that you can use your calculator and get the right numbers. If you can't do that, if you're just relying on me to tell you what the numbers are, then you're going to have a problem once you start your practice. So pause and make sure that you get all the right numbers in the rest of your table. Okay, hopefully you filled in the rest of your table. We're going to check those answers right now, okay? So you should have gotten all of those numbers that you see filled in on my table, -7, -12, -15, -16, and so on. And make sure that what you did matched mine. If not, pause, put parentheses around the numbers that you plugged in, and go back and fix it, okay? But moving forward, you're going to notice that my parabola has a center. So right here at -16, that number is in the middle, and there's no match for it, okay? But if you look on either side of 16, you're going to see that the number is the same. -15 is on both sides. And then you're going to see that -12 is the same on both sides. And that continues all the way. So our parabolas are symmetrical. They have a middle point, and then all the numbers on the outside match that. That's going to be important for us, okay? Now here's where that graph paper comes in handy. You might need to do some renumbering because we have to get all the way down to -16. So you're either going to use a graph paper, change your scale maybe, or you're going to just copy this into your notebook, however you want to do it. But draw this x and y axis. I counted by 1s on the x-axis and I counted by 2s on the y-axis. So that's what's going on with my numbers there. Okay? Now, I'm going to plot all the points on my table. So I have a point at -4, 9. I have a point at -3, 0. I have a point at -2, 7. And I'm just going to plot all those points, and that's what you see there. Once you have them all plotted, you're going to connect them with a line, and you should see that U shape. This is a parabola. We've talked about that a couple of times throughout the year, but that U shape, we're going to call it a parabola every time, okay? All right, so you plotted those points, you made your parabola. Now we're going to take note of a couple things. Number one, I'm going to label my x-intercepts and my y-intercept. You see here on your graph that we go through the x-axis at -3, 0 and at 5, 0. You can also see that in your table, your x-intercepts right here and here. And your y-intercept where we cross the y-axis is at 0, -15, and you see that here on your table. So when you get to your practice, it's going to ask you to label the x and y-intercepts, and that's going to be important. The other thing I want to do quick is I want to notice the vertex. Okay, so I'm going to first draw a line down the middle of my parabola. And that low point right there is the vertex. It's either the highest point or the lowest point of my parabola is the vertex. And that point here happens at 1, -16. And you can see that on your table. That's the middle point. Okay? And so 1, -16 is what we call the vertex. You're going to want to know that as well. All right? Okay, it's kind of a long process, but that is graphing from a table. Let's move on. The second thing we're going to do is graphing from intercepts. Now, I find this to be exceptionally useful when my parabola is in factored form, meaning it's already in parentheses, it's already factored here, so I don't have to do that. Okay, so we're going to start by finding our x-intercepts, so we can put those on our graph. We're not making a table this time, we're only finding the x and y-intercepts. So, let's start by plugging in, to find an x-intercept, we plug in 0 for y. So I'm going to take out y in my equation, and I'm going to replace it with 0. Okay? Now this should look familiar from the last target. We're going to use the zero product property, okay, the ZPP. And so what you do is you take your two factors, x plus 3, set that equal to 0, and x minus 2 and set that equal to 0. Okay, and then we solve both of those. So we're going to subtract 3, we get x equals -3, we add 2, we get x equals 2, and then we write those as an ordered pair because those are our intercepts. All right? So we found our x-intercepts. That's going to be 2 points that we put on our graph. Now we're going to find the y-intercepts. And remember, to find a y-intercept, we plug in 0 for x. So this is going to be a little easier. We plug in 0 for x, and then we just have y equals 0 plus 3 times 0 minus 2. And so that is y equals 3 times -2, which is -6. So that is our y-intercept. And so if this feels easier than a table, that's great. You can do this. And we're actually going to graph our parabola just from those 3 points. So let's make a graph. And this time, I can count by just 1s in all directions. So I started by putting a dot on my x-intercepts at -3, 0 and at 2, 0. So put a dot at both of those points. Then I put a dot at 0, -6. That's my y-intercept. Now what I want you to do is I want you to draw in, this is called the line of symmetry. So halfway between your x-intercepts is going to be where that vertex is. Okay, that line of symmetry, wherever is halfway between your x-intercepts. Okay, if I was making a table, this would be my lowest point. And then I'm going to graph my parabola starting on that line and going up in both directions through all the points that I plotted. So like that. So I started on my pink line, I went up through both of those dots, and then I tried to be symmetrical and I went up through my other x-intercept. Okay? And I believe that is it. So that was your graphing from intercepts. Now that seemed easy, right? Easier than the table. But that parabola was also given to us in factored form. If we're graphing from intercepts in standard form, meaning it's not factored, it's going to be just a little bit more work, but you still might like it better. So let's see. We're going to start by finding our x-intercepts. And remember, to find x-intercepts, we plug in 0 for y. So I get 0 equals 2x squared plus 6x plus 4. Okay, and now I have to factor this. So going all the way back to target 1 plus target 2, where we were factoring completely, you're going to notice that all of these terms have a greatest common factor of 2 that I can pull out to the front. So I take that 2 out to the front, and when I divide all these terms by 2, I'm left with x squared and 3x and 2. Okay, and then I need to use my box and my diamond to factor what's left in parentheses there. So why don't you take a minute, pause the video, and factor that x squared plus 3x plus 2. Okay, so I'm going to show you the factored form. It's going to kind of cruise through, but this is what you should have done. 0 equals 2 times x plus 1 times x plus 2. If you didn't get that, your box and diamond is right there. Okay, that's how you get those factors. Okay, once it's factored, now it looks just like the last problem. So I can just find my x-intercepts by using that zero product property. Okay, so I do x plus 1 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0. And this factor in the front, 2, can't equal 0, so I can kind of ignore that at this point in the problem. The only things that can equal 0 are these, depending on what x is. So I subtract 1, I get x equals negative 1. I subtract 2, I get x equals negative 2. And then my two x-intercepts are negative 1, 0 and negative 2, 0. Okay, we're going to find our y-intercepts. Now to find our y-intercepts, we plug in 0 for x. Okay, and what's going to happen is that this 2 times 0 squared and this 6 times 0 are going to go away, and my y-intercept is just 0, 4. You're going to see that it's always that last number. As you do more of these, you're going to see that the y-intercept is always that last number. So that's a nice pattern that makes that really easy. Okay, let's make our graph. We're going to plot those 3 dots and then draw in our line of symmetry halfway between our x-intercepts. So my line of symmetry is halfway between negative 2 and negative 1 there. And my y-intercept is up here at 0, 4, and then I just go up from that line of symmetry and up from that line of symmetry and hit all of those dots, okay? Your vertex happens right there in the middle, that low point. Okay, so that's graphing from intercepts, even if you have to factor. That's how you graph from intercepts. So like I said, you can do a table or you can do intercepts. Whatever one feels right for you is what you can do, okay? Now I'm going to have you try one more. You can use whichever method you want. So you're going to graph the parabola y equals x squared plus 6x plus 8. You can either make a table or you can do the x and y intercepts. So you decide what works best for you. Okay? So pause the video and do this all the way through. Use your notes you just took. And once you have your picture graphed, once you have your parabola graphed, I want you to unpause the video and check your solution. All right, let's check and see what you did. So I actually solved this problem both ways, with intercepts and with tables, and this is the graph that I got. My x-intercepts ended up at negative 2, 0 and negative 4, 0. And my y-intercept was at 0, 8. And when I had my table, I realized my vertex was here at negative 3, negative 1. Alrighty. So that's what your graph should have looked like. If it didn't, maybe call your teacher over and see what happened to your graph, or try and look back at your notes and figure it out. You're going to do the practice next, and for the practice this time, you're going to need a physical worksheet. So go to the place in your room, whether your teacher has it or it's set out somewhere, and find that Target 4 practice worksheet. That's going to go with the Google form. So that is your next step.